The podcast you're about to listen to, Focused on Forward, was created on Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First off, it's free. Free is always amazing. Secondly, there's a creation tool that's going to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone, tablet, or computer. Anchor is going to take that podcast and going to distribute it for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so many other platforms. And you get to make money from your podcast right away with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one convenient place. So how do you find it and use it? Well, go to your app store, download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. You too can make a podcast. You can do it with Anchor. Welcome to Focused on Forward. The purpose of this podcast is to focus on recovery from life situations. Be it a disease, chronic or acute, perhaps the loss of someone so dear to you in death, or a change of life patterns that has affected you so profoundly that you have no choice but to find your new normal and become focused on moving forward. Each episode is designed to show the positivity that people bring to each and every one of their stories, the successes they've had, ways that they have become so definitively focused on moving forward. We look forward to sharing their stories, and we hope that they inspire you just as much as they have inspired us. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Focused on Forward. Our guest today is Sarah Werner. I'm excited to have Sarah on. I've talked with her a little bit on another podcast I co-host called Funny Science Fiction. That's where I met Sarah. And actually, I'm a member of one of her Facebook groups. Now, the cool thing about Sarah is that not only is she awesome, but she also has a couple different podcasts that she hosts. And we talk about this on Funny Science Fiction, but there's the Right Now podcast. There's the Girl in Space podcast. If you're familiar with Sarah, you may have heard of her through her TED Talks, some other things that she's done. But today we're going to talk with Sarah on a little bit different of a topic than maybe what you're familiar with her with. And that is the topic of overcoming challenges, which is what we talk about here on Focused on Forward. So Sarah, thank you so much for being a guest today. We're very excited to have you, and I'm excited to be able to talk with you again.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to talk with you again. I'm excited to be here, and I hope this is a really valuable experience for your audience as well.
I think it will be. So what I'd like to do is I'll just turn this over to you, and you can tell us about Sarah.
Well, you did such a great job in your introduction. I don't know if there's anything left. I'm Sarah. I'm a creator. I love science fiction. I love being a nerd. I love creating things. And all of those things come with their own bucket of struggles. So yeah, I currently live here in the Midwest, and I travel to work on other projects. I do national speaking. Let me know like what I can say that is going to be most helpful here.
Well, let's talk about your day-to-day challenges, the things that Sarah deals with on a day-to-day basis that create obstacles in her life that need to be overcome.
Wonderful. That's such a good way of putting that. Thank you. That is exactly the guidance I needed. So I'm self-employed, and I left my day job in 2017. I was in marketing for 10 years and digital marketing specifically for 5 years. And I was struggling with the whole being told what to do, 8 to 5 structure thing. And there was a lot of guilt and feelings of selfishness that I struggled with there. Like, who am I to think that the system isn't right for me? You know, who am I to want to strike out on my own and start my own business? But I did it. And as of 2017, I've been my own boss, which comes with a lot of challenges on its own. Let's see. I am now working for myself. So I do podcasting, I do writing, I do teaching, I do speaking. I have a lot of different income streams that I draw from, which has been a blessing.
Sure.
Yeah, gosh. And there's challenges in everything from knowing how hard to push yourself and knowing when to give yourself a break, which being your own boss that's a huge challenge. It's very easy to either overwork yourself or get to a point where you're not making enough money from your work. And there's a very delicate balance there that isn't quite defined. So you're always
Absolutely.
shooting for, something that's nebulous and sort of invisible. Um, yeah, and just making enough money to make ends meet. You're completely on your own, and it's sort of up to you. There's no backup. There's nothing. There's no boss you can blame anything on. There's no oh, the CEO made a bad decision, because the
Right.
CEO is you.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so that's been it's been a beautiful experience. I'm really grateful that I'm doing it, but it definitely has not been without challenges. If that double negative works
Right.
there.
It does. Okay. So let's talk about those challenges. Now, for many people who
Yeah.
are creative, you talked about the work balance struggle. For many people who are creative, that is a very large and real struggle, because the creative side of things pushes them. It's what drives them. It's their motor. Um, but it can also create a depth of anxiety.
Mm.
Does that something that you have to work around?
It absolutely is. And I've struggled with not only anxiety, but depression my entire life, and wasn't really diagnosed with it until, oh gosh, probably 2012 or 2013.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we can talk about that too. I like to be very open
Sure.
about mental health and
Yeah.
that kind
Whatever
of
you're
stuff.
comfortable sharing.
Perfect. Okay. So yes, let's see. Um, yeah, well, are you okay just like diving into
Yep.
some hard
Do it.
stuff to
Go
talk
for it.
about? Okay. Okay, let's just do this.
You're
So
driving the bus. I'm just a passenger.
fantastic. So yeah, I didn't really understand. So, I've been a creative my whole life, like probably many of your listeners, and there's sort of this natural connection between being creative and having some sort of darkness about you, having anxiety, having depression. You hear about the really tragic rate of artists and creators who choose to end their lives. You hear there's just a lot of that going on, and we see musicians and artists every day who are not living their healthiest and most thriving lives.
Correct.
And in I just got to a point in probably, yeah, maybe 2012 or 2013. I don't remember the exact time, but I was going through a very dark time. And my boss actually said something to me, and this was very unexpected. I was working for a digital marketing company, and um, just the despair was really just, I was drowning in despair. And my boss texted me and said, "Hey, I think we need to go get a beer." And I was like, "Okay." And so we met, and he was like, "So, hey, you may not know this about me, but I struggle with anxiety and depression." And it was like the floodgates were opened.
Oh
As
wow.
soon as I had somebody who I trusted and admired, and I'm sorry, there's a very loud aircraft going by. I hope it's not getting picked up.
A little bit. It's okay. We know what it
Okay,
is. It'll go by soon enough.
perfect. I live by an Air Force base, so that's
Nothing
just
you can
really
do about
wonderful.
that.
Yep, nope. Oh, and there it goes. So he and I sat down, and it was so wonderful to have this figure who I trusted and admired, and also was male. I was working in a largely male dominated field. Um, and, oh, I'm a woman and my emotions are getting the better of me. And that's a weakness that I need to hide. And I really struggled with that,
Okay.
because I didn't want to look weak or infirm or,
Right. In a male centric
whatever.
business. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I was also trying to hide all this depression and anxiety, but apparently I wasn't doing a good enough job. And my wonderful, beautiful employer just sat me down, and we had like a 2-hour conversation over beers in this really trashy bar. And
Perfect.
at,
Yeah.
at the end of that conversation, I had committed to making an appointment with with a doctor, and soon after that, I started going on medication for anxiety and depression, and it completely turned my life around in the best way. I'd been resistant to it before because I had seen the movie. I don't know if you've seen Garden State with Zach Braff and Natalie
I
Portman.
keep saying that I'm going to. That's on my list
Okay.
of things I need to watch.
So basically, the premise of this story is that Zach Braff's character is over medicated and incapable of feeling human emotion anymore.
Correct.
You know, he's been taking antidepressants forever, and he's like, I'm not human. And he goes off his meds, I think. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen the movie. But the movie basically is like, yeah, go off your meds and experience life as it was meant to be experienced. No more dulling your senses. And so I was carrying that baggage with me. And so when my doctor suggested they put me on a very low dose of a medication for my anxiety and depression, I was really resistant. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to dull my feelings. I don't want to live a lesser human experience. And then there's the creative aspect too. I think there's a very real belief that creativity is tied to strong emotion, and
Yeah.
creativity is tied to somehow our struggle and our depression. And I'm like, I don't want this to change me as a creator. Like that was a very real concern for me.
I
But
identify with everything you just
oh,
said, by the way.
yes, I decided to try it, and I'm so glad that I did. um I went on a low dose, and I was like, okay, we're just going to try this. And my doctor was very understanding. He's like, yep, we're just going to try it. If we need to wean you off again, we can do that. But I just want you to try it because, you have been entertaining ideas of self-harm. You have been not in a
Sure.
great place, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I went on those medications, and it was not at all what I expected. I didn't stop feeling human emotion, which
Yeah.
I was very grateful for. What it did, and I honestly, I didn't stop feeling depressed. Like, it didn't take away the depression; it just made it more manageable, and that was really key for me. And so I can now get a grip on what I'm feeling, and those feelings, that chemical imbalance doesn't control my life. And you'll notice, like, if you look back through my history, like, it's all laid out on my website. Once I started taking that medication, then I started creating the Right Now podcast. I started creating Girl in Space. I started doing national speaking. Um, I started writing for Forbes. What it did was it got me out of my own way. It
Right.
got that barrier out from in front of me so that I could focus on actually moving forward with the things that I wanted to do with my life. And I'm so incredibly grateful to this day that someone encouraged me in love and friendship to get help. Like, it's changed my life a million times over. So,
Yeah. I think from my own personal experience with these issues, for myself, I knew I had some level of issue before my daughter went into the hospital.
mm,
When we came out of the hospital, trying to refocus my mind, and I would find for me, it was more of an issue of, I knew it wasn't right for a man to be sitting at his desk watching Star Wars, which he absolutely adores, and a funny scene, and sitting there crying. Something was
mm,
wrong.
yeah.
And I kept kind of, and I work from home. Especially, my wife would see me do this, and she's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, it was just a really touching scene, I'm fine. And it was like a silly scene, and she's like, yeah, she knew better. You try to pull that down, you try and hide it and swallow it down as much as you can. And I had much the same reservation. I did not want, because I had seen people who had gone on to depression and anxiety meds, and almost zombie like, robotic,
Yeah.
and what they did, and I did not want that to be me. And so I had a very similar conversation with my doctor. He started me on one pill. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way I felt. And he says, okay, we're done. And he
Yeah.
put me on something else. And I have, that has been the best thing for me, because it's much what you talked about. It enabled me to be able to refocus my efforts, focus, um, on what I want to do. And since then, I've started two podcasts.
Yes.
I've gotten, I've been more active and more creative with my t-shirt company. And all these other things. So it's allowed me to be able to focus my levels of creativity and what I was doing, and even focus on my family like I should have
Mm.
been, you know, even a little more so. And so, as I like to tell my daughter, congratulations, you get Olive Dad now. And I'm not sure that she's sold on that yet, but
Oh, but I love it. I love that you're there. I love that you're present. That's a beautiful
yeah.
gift to her and to yourself and to your whole family.
So, but yeah, so I identify with a lot of what you're talking about there. And I think that for when it comes to terms of mental health, I think people are very hesitant and resistant to that because of they don't want the zombie feeling. And I think, frankly, if your doctor's not willing to work with you on those things, then maybe it's time to consider different avenues.
Yes.
I never, I'm not going to tell you what medicines to take. I'm not going to tell you what doctors to go talk to. That's not my job. I'm not educated in that. But, if you know it's not working for you, then it's time to, you have to be your own advocate. You have to be able to
Yes.
speak up and say, this isn't working. I need something else to change.
That is so true. Oh, that's so true. Being your own advocate and realizing that reaching out and asking for help is not weakness. That is a
Absolutely.
sign of strength. Like that knowing yourself, that understanding yourself and understanding that something is keeping you down. It's a gesture of strength to reach out for help.
Oh, I agree completely. So how does this, or how do you manage it on a day-to-day basis? Because even though you're taking medications, I'm taking medications, there are still things that I have to do, and pardon the pun and the intro of the show name, but to remain focused on forward. There are things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that I'm moving forward. What are the
Mm.
things that you do in your life to keep yourself moving forward?
Oh, that's such a good question because it's something that I am still struggling with. It's something that I'm still working with. Moving forward is this weird dance of understanding who you are and what you need and understanding what those needs mean. So as an example for this, so before I left my day job, writing and creating was my hobby. It was what I did for fun in my free time. And it was a way that I recharged after a day at the office. It let me get my emotions out. It let me play in a world that I had control over and all these other reasons that we create. And when I left my job and I was creating full time, I got into a place where the thing that I used to do as a hobby, I was now doing full time. And so I would write for 8 hours and then I would continue writing because that's how I was used to recharging and, getting my energy back and resting. And I got to a point where my husband had to talk to me and he was like, "So, hey, I love you and I love all these things that you're doing, but you're working like, I'm going to exaggerate slightly, but you're working like 20 hours a day." And I was like, "Well, it's not work because I love it." And there was just this really weird subtle tension of, do I need to like get a new hobby? And do I need to do less of what I love? Like that's not why I started doing this.
Right.
You know, I I got into this so I could do what I love. And what does it mean to rest? And then, when you're conflating rest with losing money as a business owner, and then there's all this guilt from our Protestant work ethic. I live here in the Midwest, and it's just very much like if you're not working, you're not worth anything.
Right.
And so
I
there's
also
this
understand that.
oh my gosh, it's true. And there's this huge tangle of what does it mean to rest? What does it mean to work? What does it mean to move forward? And how do you move forward if you're too focused on moving forward? If you're just in production mode all the time. And I feel very fortunate that I have a support system of people who love and care about me, and that has just been such a huge guiding and driving force in my life. And these people in my support system um, are good at noticing and saying, "Hey, Sarah, so you're working 20-hour days and you're not resting." And then they talk to me in I don't know, in a very open way about, hey, rest is important and you can't pour anything good out for from an empty cup or an empty pitcher. And if you are completely emptied out and if you are completely martyring yourself for something, that's not quite healthy.
Right.
So, and then I don't know, I grew up in a religious, like, Christian household, and for me, it was very much, oh, your life is supposed to be in service to others. And this is actually what my TED Talk was about, was
Okay.
how do we give without completely martyring ourselves? And how do we live to serve others? And is living for ourselves selfish? Is self-care selfish? And where is the line there? And so this has been it's been an ongoing struggle, not
Yeah.
to feel guilty every time uh you know I take a nap. And, like, even saying that I take a nap every once in a while, I'm, like, embarrassed about it.
I'm
But
not. I'm proud. I
are
love
you?
my naps. Naps are glorious.
They are, and I
I
enjoy
am.
them, but
I'm
you
so
know
sad that I resisted them when I was a child.
mm, me too. Maybe we just need to, like, make up for that. Like, hey, I
I'm
didn't do this
trying.
when I was 5, so I'm gonna do it now that I'm this age. Like, I don't know, but there's some sort of really awful guilt and sense of worthlessness. And I think that there's also this, I perceive other people as judging me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm afraid to tell them, like, yeah, I took the afternoon off because I'm going to work from like 8 to midnight tonight. So I took the afternoon off and I took a nap and I made some brownies and I watched Netflix. I'm almost afraid to let other people know that I have fun in my life and that I have good things in my life, because I want to prove so hard that I deserve this life that I have, and
Yeah.
that, so it's in sometimes, every once in a while, someone will say something like, I had somebody tell me a few years ago, like, oh, how's your life of fun employment? And, like, that really stuck with me, like, oh, I'm not good enough if I enjoy my life. I need to be
Right.
suffering. I need to be working hard. I need to be, like, hurting in some way in order to be valid and worthwhile as a contributing member to society. So those are some of the things that I struggle with on a daily basis, is just, oh, am I allowed to go for a walk? Well, maybe if I count it as, exercise and counting my steps, maybe that's enough suffering. Maybe that's enough work in order to make it a
Yeah.
valid thing to do. And so that's my constant mindset, and I'm trying to work through that. So
I think that's a very familiar and constant mindset for those who are self-employed, because trying to find that balance and trying to, you know, it, and I one of the things that you just mentioned that I really appreciate is the fact that the people around you are willing to call you out.
yes,
My wife is very willing to call me out
good.
on my stuff, which is good because I need that,
I
and
need
I
it too.
and I know that, and I'm thrilled that she's willing to do that, because left to my own shenanigans, I would not go very far. Because I would empty myself out. Using that cup illustration, I would be the empty cup, and I know that, because I already have a tendency to get up early in the,
Yeah,
I'm not getting up as early as I used to, but, get up early in the morning and then work till, late at night, and,
yeah.
burn the candle at both ends. And before you know it, you've got nothing else to give to anybody.
Mm.
So I think that's a very real and understandable thing for anybody who is self-employed in any form. And for those who, the comment of fun employment,
Mhm.
um, self-employment can be fun, but it's
Yes,
also very much a challenge.
yes.
And there's a whole different level of stresses and anxieties and all these other things that come along with it. So you mentioned something there in that last little bit about self-care.
Mm.
And and so let's talk about self-care for a moment, because the importance of self-care to mental health, it's vitally important in my opinion. So what are some of the things that you do? And now we touched on this a little bit in Funny Science Fiction during your interview there. We talked a little bit about some of, what do you do to recharge your batteries? But let's go into a little bit more depth about that. What does Sarah do for self-care in those times where the cup is almost empty? How do we
Mm.
recharge ourselves and get ourselves back to a point where we feel like we're a productive member of society again inside of our own terms?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And it's I don't know, I have to constantly first and foremost remind myself that self-care is not selfish. Because I have a whole bunch of hangups around that. But for me, self-care is being very intentional about recharging. And we mentioned naps a little bit earlier. I try not to take too many of those because like my if I'm gonna go down for a nap, it's gonna be like 2.5 hours. Like I am just out. And
I can't
so
take a 20-minute nap. It
I
doesn't
can't
happen.
either. Those
Takes me
magical people who can do that.
I'm jealous because it takes
I
me that
yeah.
long just to get comfortable.
Oh my gosh, me too. And then I'm just, I'm like drooling like I'm hard just asleep. So I try not to do too many of those just because they tend to like eat my day away.
Understood.
Oh gosh. Taking good care of myself, and it's different for everybody, and
Hmm.
some things that you think are self-care are actually not. So like if you spend your whole day doing creative writing, then maybe creative writing on that same project is not self-care in the way that it used to be, because those things change and they shift. For me, I love reading books always recharges me. It's just something that I found is, and it does it in a way that I don't get from like watching Netflix or anything like that. Like reading books is like my true love in life. Going outside for a walk is always a good way for me to recharge, getting away from screens. I live on a graveyard, and so just going back through the paths, and there's all sorts of hawks and wildlife that lives back there,
Oh,
and it's really
nice.
lovely. Oh, it's been so nice. When we first moved here, I was like, gross, we're living on a graveyard, but it's been just such a gift. Like, I love it.
Well,
Um,
the neighbors are quiet. That's
they
helpful.
are. It's so peaceful and it's beautiful, and there's trees. And I just have to be careful about going out there when there's a funeral. I'm like, oh, I got to scope it out. Okay, there's no funerals, so I can go on my walk.
Sure. Be observant.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, be respectful. Um, but yeah, reading books has been amazing. I also do a lot of journaling, um, and there's just this really like fine line between writing for work and journaling for mental health and for self-care. And I have to be very intentional to like switch over,
Okay.
like, okay, I'm going to stop working on Girl in Space and I'm going to write to recharge for myself. And so, um,
So
I, yeah,
without diving into what you journal about, because that's
yeah.
private, I'm never going to ask you about that. But what
Okay.
give us some examples of things that people could journal about that is different from creative writing, that's different from what I call productive writing.
Yeah.
So there's a large difference between those two, and there should be. But what are some things that people can journal about? Because I know several people that do journal, and they find it very cathartic as a nice release from their day.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And this is something I'm still, again, this is, I feel, a lifelong craft, a lifelong habit, and I'm still learning. But I've been journaling for years and years. And the way that I look at it is different from creative writing, is that what I'm doing is I'm asking myself questions about myself. And so I'll start off, and you can start off with a blank page and you can go from there, or you can start with a prompt. There are so many amazing journal prompts online. Like, oh, write a letter to yourself as a child, forgiving yourself for something, or, how do you feel about this? How do you deal with anger? How do you deal with sadness? Do you feel like it's okay to feel sad? Like, there's just so many amazing journal prompts online. But if you want to do sort of a blank page approach and just open up your journal, you can just start by asking, how am I feeling? Why do I feel this way? And where is this coming from? And just letting yourself exist on the page. For me, it's even an act of giving myself permission to be myself and to feel my feelings, and to get in touch with what is going on in my own brain that may be affecting everything else. And it's just been a really beautiful exercise, because every time I journal, I come away with a new insight about something I've been dealing with, or just a facet of my upbringing. Or, I mean, it's just been a beautiful and rich resource. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with Julia Cameron's morning pages.
No.
She has a book called The Artist's Way that I would recommend. And she has this idea, and this is where I take away my idea for journaling, of just every morning before you get into your creative work for the day, you write 2 or 3 pages in your journal for yourself, and it just gets all the garbage out of the way. So then later you can focus on your creative task,
Okay.
without all of those open loops kind of in your mind about the
Sure.
rest of the day. So,
Oh, that's a good suggestion. I like that.
yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to one of the things you talked about is your favorite method of self care.
Hmm.
Talked about reading books. And since you suggested that, I'm going to ask you to suggest 2 books that help you or have helped you uh, kind of get yourself into that zone. So what are
Hmm.
2 books that Sarah reads when she's going through self-care, she's refilling her cup?
Oh boy. So these are going to be a little bit more personal development focused, if that's okay. I also read
Sure.
just for fun. I read everything and anything. I read horror, sci-fi. I love it all. Thrillers. I mean, I love everything. But 2 books that I would recommend that genuinely help me are actually, I have this is, I forgot, a audio, not a visual podcast. So pretend I'm holding up the book that's right over here. It's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
Okay.
And what that talks about is actually moving forward despite the ways that we sabotage ourselves. And that I reread that book once or twice every year, and I always discover something new from it. And it just helps me recenter and reground myself. The other one I would recommend that helps me really get back on track is Deep Work by Cal Newport. Um, it is it talks about how we use our time and how we use our creative energy, and how to get really deeply involved with your own projects and how to focus a little bit better. And that is just, those 2 books have been extremely life changing.
All right, cool. So I'm going to ask you a question that I like to ask everyone who's a guest on my podcast.
Okay.
So, looking back over your life experiences, what is one piece of advice that you've received that helps you to remain focused on forward?
Hmm. That's such a good question. And I have exactly the answer that I want to give you.
Awesome.
And that is make them tell you no. I went through a lot of my life thinking that if I did all the right things, then I would continue moving forward and that I would automatically be granted permission to do the things that I wanted to do. And I got a little bit of a rude awakening with that when, in the workforce, you go in for your quarterly or annual review, whatever it is you go in for, and you're like, okay, are you going to give me a raise? And you're not asking that vocally. You're just like sitting there waiting, like, okay, I exceeded expectations. I did all the right things. I've been, volunteering in my spare time. I've been training this other employee and mentoring this person. And I didn't know that you had to ask for things, that you had to ask for a raise, that you had to be vocal about it because the world's just not going to reward you for being a good person. You have to ask for what you want. And that was really hard for me as a like very uh you know grounded, what's the word I'm looking for, humble, somebody who practices humility, to say, hey, can I have this because I deserve it? That
Right.
was really, really hard. And so I went through a women's leadership program, and one of the women who spoke at it was a judge here in town. And she just reinforced, like, hey, you've got to ask for the things that you want in life, because there's no one who's going to, come up to your door and be like, I heard you were a good person. Here's this. Here's
Right.
this. You have to not only ask for the things you want, but you have to essentially do it in a way that is confident and unafraid. And so a lot of us, in asking for things, we're afraid of rejection, or at least I am. I'm afraid of the worst thing that can happen, which is they say no. And um, using this woman's advice of make them tell you no really empowered me to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to keep asking until they say no. And that's really what allowed me to move forward. So I started asking for raises. I started asking for promotions. Like, hey, just so you know, we're at my quarterly review next quarter. I'm going to tell you that I want to be a manager of this division. So just so you know, I'm going to be asking for that. And they did. They told me no every single time, which is, one of the reasons I left to be self-employed. Um, but really making no, asking until they tell you no means that you are moving forward to the best of your ability.
Okay. So, question for you from that piece of advice.
Yeah.
Why do you find it, or why do you think it's so difficult for us to be able to ask for things for ourselves?
Mm. There's a lot going on there. I think part of it is we question whether or not we deserve them. We question whether or not we are worth anything. Um, and there's, I think, also this expectation that we'll be passively rewarded for our good deeds. You turn in a good paper and you get an A on your paper, and you don't have to ask, like, teacher, will you grade my paper? So I think we're trained in a way to just kind of passively receive things in life. And once you get out of the school system, it doesn't necessarily work that way anymore. You don't turn in
True.
your work and they say, okay, here's a promotion.
Instant
Um,
karma is no longer a
e-
thing.
exactly, exactly. And so, but it's really difficult to do that because we're told, and I don't know if this is more for females or this is more for everybody, but we're told to be humble and to not boast and to not brag. And but at the same time, if you don't tell anyone about your accomplishments, they don't know about them.
Right.
And so it puts you in this really weird place of, not only am I afraid to ask for things because I'm afraid of rejection, but B, I don't maybe think I deserve this. C, because my self-worth is low. And
Mm-hmm.
C, I'm not comfortable saying, so like, hey, this quarter, I brought in an extra 25% revenue, because that's boastful
Right.
and arrogant, right? And you're
Don't want
not
to seem too
supposed to do those.
braggadocious. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's something we have to do. And so that's something I had to get really comfortable with, and I try to affirm it as much as I can and say, yes, I am a writer. Yes, I'm an award-winning writer. Yes, and just get comfortable. Like, I'm a national speaker. Like, yes, I can say that I have earned it. And just reconciling, it's almost like you have to come to terms with your own success, and you have to be, comfortable owning it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just such a bizarre thing.
A-
Um,
And part of the reason why I asked you that question
yeah.
is because I tie it in with anxiety.
Mm,
Um, because myself being a person who deals with anxiety, and I have my own anxiousness about certain things, I have found it hard in my life to make the ask
mm,
because I'm afraid of the possibility of the no.
yes.
And so I think it's really interesting that I love that, make them tell you no. Um, because we have to find a way to kind of get around ourselves, to get out of our
Yeah.
own way, to get to a point where we aren't expecting things just to be handed to us, but things that you're willing to work for, that you're willing to ask for, that you're willing to reach for. So that's the reason why I asked the question, just so you know, is because I tie it into our own anxiety issues
Oh,
and
absolutely.
struggles, along those lines. So I think that's a really good point and a really nice piece of advice. Really,
Thank you.
make them tell you no. So I know we need to wind up here, but I want to ask one more thing.
Yeah.
Tell Where can people find more information about Sarah Werner? I want you to give
Oh,
you just a quick second, plug yourself.
thank you.
So, and I won't tell you no.
Okay. Thank you. This is so wonderful. What a lovely opportunity. So, people can find more about me out at sarahwerner.com. That's sarahwerner.com. I have all sorts of links to my podcasts and free resources and ebooks that people can download. I like to make everything available for free. So it's all out there at my website. You can also find me on, gosh, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Tumblr. I don't know. You can find me on every single Instagram, also social media platform at the username Sarah Ray Werner. That's SarahRheaWerner. Come follow me. I'll follow you back. We can be friends. It'll be lovely. But yeah, that's where people can find me. Oh, and then the Right Now podcast. That's WRITE because puns. And
Puns
the
are
Girl
good.
in Space podcast are available on Apple Podcasts, all of the places, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, all the places. So
Excellent. Okay,
yeah.
cool. And if you'd like to see another interview with
Yes.
Sarah, you can go to YouTube, check out Funny Science Fiction Podcast. We, when I say we, me and my other co-host interviewed her for that because of her Girl in Space podcast, which is phenomenal, by the way. If you're into sci-fi, check that out. But yeah, go check her out on social media. You won't be disappointed in what you find. Sarah is an awesome human being. And
So are you.
well, thank you. I try. Very impressed with what she's done. And honestly, even though I am not a creative writer, I follow her on some of her creative writing things, her lives and so forth. And they've helped me tremendously with organization for my own podcast, for my t-shirt store, and how to assemble my ideas. And she's encouraged me to go buy so many more notebooks. That's a running joke that you'll understand if you tune into the lives. So anyway, but thank you, Sarah, so much for doing this. So very appreciated your insight on things and your willingness to talk about them.
Thank you, Tim. It has been an absolute pleasure to be on your show. You are such I want to say such a gentle and encouraging interviewer, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for your time and this opportunity. It's been a delight.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, guys, I think that's going to conclude us. Thank you for listening to Focused on Forward. Well, that concludes another episode of Focused on Forward. To be a guest of Focused on Forward, you can reach us through Twitter at podcastfof, through our Facebook page named Focused on Forward, or through email focusedonforward@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing each and every one of your stories that has yet to be told. So until then, be safe, be kind, and be loving to one another as you stay focused on forward.